2:13 p.m., Salisha Ali took her last known steps into a house she had already fought to leave behind. She wasn't moving back in. She wasn't trying again. She was just visiting, just helping, just one last time. Hours later, she spoke to her family on FaceTime. Her voice was steady. Nothing seemed wrong. By the next morning, her phone went silent. No calls, no messages, no explanation. Her husband said she packed her things, got into an Uber, and disappeared. But 2 months later, in a quiet park near 149th Avenue and Brookville Boulevard, in Springfield Gardens, a garbage bag was opened. Inside was a human torso. No head, no arms, no legs. The only clue, a set of tattoos, and what investigators would later find, hidden inside a phone tracking app, would raise a question that still lingers. What really happened after she walked through that door? Salisha Ali was 34 years old, a mother of 3 daughters, 3 young girls who knew her voice, her routines, her presence, as something constant in their lives. She wasn't just raising children, she was holding everything together. Her world revolved around them. School mornings, meals, late-night check-ins, the quiet responsibilities no one ever sees, but every child depends on. She lived in Trinidad, where she worked as a security officer for a local airline. It wasn't glamorous, but it was steady, reliable. A job that paid the bills and gave her structure. She had built something real, a home she managed, a car she drove, a routine that made sense. Every day had a rhythm, and every decision she made came back to her daughters. But stability doesn't always mean satisfaction, because somewhere beneath that routine, there was a quiet desire for more income, more opportunity, a different future, one that could give her children something bigger than what she had. And that opportunity appeared during the holidays. And at a Christmas gathering, among familiar faces and casual conversation, she met a man who seemed to have answers. His name was Rupchand Simboo. He was 75 years old, living in Queens, New York. A man who had already built his life, far from where Salisha was starting hers. He spoke with confidence, with certainty. He told her he could help her relocate, help her get her documents sorted, help her find work in the United States. To someone looking for a way forward, it sounded like a door opening, a chance, a shortcut to a better life. But from the outside, not everyone saw opportunity. Some saw risk. The age gap raised questions, his intentions felt unclear, and the speed at which things began to move made people uneasy. Because sometimes, what looks like a way out is something else entirely. The man offering that opportunity was not starting over. He already had a life in New York, a home in South Ozone Park, a routine, control over his environment. To outsiders, Rupchand Simboo appeared stable, experienced, someone who knew how things worked, and that's exactly what made him convincing. He presented himself as a guide, someone who could navigate systems, paperwork, immigration, survival, but the people closest to Salisha saw something else. Her mother described him as controlling, a man who expected things done his way, or not at all. And once Salisha moved in, that control became visible. Not all at once, not immediately, but gradually. He didn't want her working. He didn't want her independent. He wanted her inside the house, cooking, cleaning, available, present, and when she wasn't, the response wasn't calm. It was pressure, repeated reminders that she was living under his roof, that everything she had came through him. And that meant something. The opportunity he once represented started to change shape. It became smaller, more restrictive, less like freedom, and more like control. Salisha Ali met Rupchand Simboo in 2023 in Trinidad. At the time, it didn't feel unusual. Two adults from similar cultural backgrounds, connecting over distance, conversations, and the promise of something more. He lived in New York. She lived in Trinidad. And like many long-distance relationships, it started with calls, messages, plans, a future that sounded better. The longer they talked about it, but from the very beginning, not everyone was convinced. Salisha's mother, Paula Sekwe, watched it unfold from a distance. And something about it didn't sit right with her. It wasn't just the fact that he lived abroad. It wasn't just the speed at which things seemed to move. It was the imbalance, the difference in age, the difference in power, the fact that he already had an established life, while her daughter would have to leave everything behind, start over, depend on him. And that worried her, because once someone gives up their environment, their routine, their independence, it becomes much harder to walk away. But Salisha had made up her mind. She wasn't being reckless. She was being hopeful. She saw opportunity, a chance to build something bigger than what she had, a future not just for herself, but for her 3 daughters. So in 2024, she made the move. She left Trinidad behind. Her home, her job, her support system, everything familiar, and she relocated to Queens, New York, to start a new life with Rupchand Simboo. Not long after arriving, they got married, and the plan was simple, clear, structured. She would settle into the United States, find stable work, build a foundation, and once everything was in place, she would bring her daughters to join her. It was never meant to be permanent separation, just a temporary sacrifice, a mother doing what she believed was necessary for long-term stability, for better opportunities, for a different future. But almost immediately, that plan began to shift. According to her family, the woman they knew started to change. Or more accurately, her environment changed her. The independence she had always carried started to fade. Back in Trinidad, Salisha worked. She earned her own money. She drove her own car. She made decisions. She had control over her life. But in Queens, that control didn't seem to exist anymore, because Simboo had expectations, and those expectations were clear. He didn't want her working, not outside the home, not building her own income, not creating her own independence. He wanted her there, at home, cooking, cleaning, maintaining the house, waiting for him, waiting for instructions, waiting for approval. And at first, maybe it felt temporary. Maybe she thought it was just an adjustment period, a phase while she settled in. But it didn't pass. It became routine. And then it became pressure, because it wasn't just about what he wanted her to do. It was about how closely he monitored her. If she didn't respond to him fast enough, he would call again and again and again, multiple times, back to back, not out of concern, but out of control. And when she didn't meet those expectations, when she pushed back, when she tried to assert even a small piece of independence, that's when the tone changed. He would threaten her, not subtly, not indirectly. He would tell her he could put her out, send her away, remove the roof over her head. And in that moment, the reality of her situation became very clear. She was in a different country, far from her family. Without her own income, without her own support system, and the person she depended on was the one creating the pressure. The tension in that household wasn't explosive. There weren't constant, dramatic confrontations. It was more quiet than that, more controlled, more calculated, but it was always there, a steady pattern, a cycle that repeated itself over and over again. Expectation, control, pushback, threat, silence, and then reset, until it happened again and again and again over time. That kind of environment wears you down. Not all at once, but slowly, until even simple decisions feel heavy, until speaking up feels risky, until you start choosing peace over resistance, even when that peace isn't real. And Salisha felt it. She recognized it, because this wasn't the life she had imagined. This wasn't why she left Trinidad. This wasn't why she separated herself from her children. This wasn't the future she had pictured when she said yes, and she didn't stay silent about it. She told her mother. In conversations that would later carry a different weight, she made something very clear, something that stayed with Paula long after those words were spoken. She said she did not come to America to become a housewife. That wasn't her plan. That wasn't her purpose. And that wasn't something she was willing to accept. But by the time she said those words, she was already inside a situation that wasn't easy to walk away from. Over time, the distance between them became impossible to ignore. The marriage wasn't growing. It wasn't strengthening. It was unraveling. It wasn't built on affection. It wasn't built on trust. It had started as an arrangement, and now it was breaking down. Then, 2 months before she disappeared, Salisha made a decision. She left. She moved out of his home in South Ozone Park and went to stay with a friend in Brooklyn. For the first time since arriving in the United States, she had space again. She had control again. And with that space came clarity. She began to rethink everything. She told her mother she wasn't focused on immigration anymore. She wasn't thinking long-term in the U.S. She had a new plan: work for a few years, save money, and then return home, back to her daughters, back to the life she understood. It sounded like she was reclaiming direction, reclaiming control. But then the phone rang. The call that changed everything. It was Rupchand Simboo. He told her he was alone. He said he needed help. He asked her to come back, just for a visit, to cook, to clean, to organize the house. It didn't sound emotional. It didn't sound like reconciliation. It sounded routine, temporary, something she had done before. And on July 13th, 2025, she agreed. That afternoon, Salisha Ali walked back into the house she had already left behind. The hours later, she spoke to her family. A FaceTime call. Normal, casual, nothing unusual. No sign of fear, no urgency. Just another conversation, just another check-in, the kind she made every day, especially for her children. No one knew that would be the last time they would ever see her alive. The next morning, everything changed. Her phone didn't ring. Messages stopped delivering. Every attempt to reach her failed. At first, it didn't make sense. This was a woman who spoke to her children every day, a mother who didn't disappear without a word. Her family waited. Then they called again and again. Still nothing. That's when Paula made the call to the one person who should have known where Salisha was, Rupchand Simboo. His answer came quickly, too quickly. He said she packed her things, ordered an Uber, and left. Just like that. No warning, no explanation, no goodbye. He told them not to worry, said she would come back, that she might walk in at any time. But something didn't sit right, because Salisha didn't leave her life behind. She didn't abandon her children. She didn't disappear without a trace. And yet, that's exactly what he was asking them to believe. Hours turned into days. Days turned into silence. Paula kept calling him. Each time, the same response. She'll come back. Don't worry. Give it time. But time didn't bring answers. It made the silence louder. There was no activity, no communication, no sign that Salisha existed anywhere. For someone so connected to her family, the silence wasn't just unusual, it was alarming. From Trinidad, thousands of miles away, Salisha's mother contacted the New York Police Department. She reported her daughter missing. At first, there were questions. Could a report be taken from overseas? Was there enough information? But Paula didn't stop. She insisted, she pushed, and eventually, the report was filed, though Simboo had already reported earlier that Salisha is missing. On the surface, it made him look cooperative. But investigators have seen this before. Sometimes, the person closest to the disappearance is also the one trying to shape the story. At that point, there was still no confirmed crime, just a missing woman, and two very different instincts about what had happened to her. More than 2 months later, on September 22nd, 2025, everything changed. It started as routine, sanitation workers collecting trash at Idlewild Park in Queens. Then something stopped them. The smell, strong, immediate, unmistakable. They opened a garbage bag near 149th Avenue and Brookville Boulevard in Springfield Gardens. Inside was a human torso. No head, no arms, no legs. Just a body, deliberately separated, discarded. Left in a place meant to stay unnoticed, but not forever. Investigators examined the remains, and that's when they noticed something important. Tattoos, distinct markings, names, a flower, details that hadn't been removed, details that could identify a person. Detectives contacted Paula. They asked her a question no parent is ever ready for. Could she identify the tattoos? And when she saw them, she didn't hesitate. She already knew. The search was over. But the truth was just beginning. Investigation deepens. With identification confirmed, the focus shifted. Detectives turned their attention to Simboo. They obtained a warrant for his phone, and inside that phone, they found something critical. A location tracking app, Life360, a digital record of movement, a timeline, and that timeline didn't match his story. The day after Salisha disappeared, he traveled to the Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, remote, isolated. The next day, Idlewild Park, the same place where the torso was found. This wasn't coincidence. It was a pattern, movement with purpose. Later, investigators searched those areas again, and this time, they found more. At Jamaica Bay Wildlife Refuge, additional remains. Her head, her limbs, recovered piece by piece, scattered, hidden, and every location brought investigators closer to the truth. But the evidence didn't stop there. Inside his home, investigators made more discoveries. A blue moving blanket, stained, a yellow rope, matching material, used in the disposal. Everything began to align, piece by piece, action by action. At this point, Investigators weren't asking if he did it. They were asking why. The motive wasn't complicated, but it was intense. Control, jealousy, possession. He was losing control over her. She had left his home, rejected his authority, refused to stay dependent, and was planning to leave the country entirely. For someone who thrives on control, that kind of rejection can feel like collapse, like losing everything. And in some cases, that loss triggers something dangerous. Not just anger, but a need to reclaim control, by any means necessary. Salisha represented independence, strength, a future outside of him. And for him, that may have been unacceptable. What happened inside that house has never been fully detailed publicly. No witnesses, no recordings, no confirmed timeline beyond that afternoon. But investigators believe the violence began shortly after she arrived. At some point, something escalated, and Salisha Ali never walked out alive. What followed wasn't confusion. It wasn't hesitation. It was action. Her body was dismembered, separated, prepared, moved, disposed, different locations, different times. At each step deliberate, each decision calculated, but even calculated actions leave traces, and those traces formed a story that led back to one place, that house. In March 2026, Rupchand Simboo was taken into custody, charged with murder, concealment of a human corpse, obstruction of governmental administration, tampering with physical evidence. Prosecutors said he went to extreme lengths to avoid responsibility, but the evidence didn't disappear, the timeline didn't change, and the locations didn't lie. He was held without bail, awaiting trial. But for Salisha's family, none of that brought relief. Her mother spoke publicly, her words heavy with grief. I have no joy, I have nothing, because justice doesn't undo loss. Her daughter was gone, and the life she tried to build ended in the very place she once believed would help her move forward. Salisha left behind 3 daughters, 3 children who spoke to their mother every day, until suddenly, they couldn't. Salisha Ali went back one last time, to a place she had already chosen to leave. She expected to walk out. She didn't. And the man who said, she simply got into a car and disappeared, now stands accused of making sure she never could. So the question remains, when she stepped through that door, what do you think really happened next? There are still unanswered questions. What exactly happened inside that house, that night? What triggered the final moment? Was it planned? Or did something snap? We may never fully know, but what we do know is that Salisha trusted someone who was never safe to trust, and a man who promised stability but delivered something unthinkable, because sometimes the most dangerous person in your life is the one you were told to depend on. Do you think this was planned from the beginning, or did something happen in that moment that escalated beyond control? Let me know what you think. If you want to hear more stories like this, stories that don't just tell you what happened, but make you question everything, take a moment, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications so you don't miss the next story. Because some stories don't end when the video does. And if you think this case is disturbing, wait until you hear what happened next.